The bridge of the UHS Defiance hummed with the familiar sound of aging machinery. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of the command deck, watching the stars through the main view screen. His ship was old, maybe too old by galactic standards. The fusion engines made noise that newer ships never made. The hull showed scratches and dents from decades of service. But Jake loved this ship like family. "Captain, incoming message from Federation Command," said Commander Lisa Hayes from her station. Her voice carried the crisp tone of someone who had served on human ships for 15 years. She knew these old vessels better than anyone. Jake nodded and walked to his chair. The message appeared on his personal screen. As he read it, his face grew serious. The words were simple but terrible. The Zephyrian Empire had broken away from the Galactic Federation. They were attacking colony worlds on the Outer Rim. 3 Federation task forces had already been destroyed. "Lisa, send a message to Admiral Blake on the Resilience. Tell him we need to talk," Jake said. Within an hour, all 12 captains of the human patrol fleet were connected by video link. Admiral Tony Blake appeared on the main screen, his gray hair and lined face showing the weight of command. Behind him, the bridge of the UHS Resilience looked just as worn as Jake's ship. "You've all seen the reports," Blake began. "The Zephyrians have superior technology. Their ships use crystalline power sources we don't understand. They have weapons that can attack the mind itself. 3 Federation fleets couldn't stop them." Captain Steve Parker of the UHS Relentless spoke up. "Admiral, what does Command want us to do?" Blake was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Command wants us to stay here and guard Earth, but I'm not going to do that. Those colonies have millions of people. The nearest Federation reinforcements are 3 weeks away." Jake felt his heart speed up. He knew what the Admiral was thinking. "Sir, are you suggesting we engage the Zephyrian fleet?" asked Captain Nick Roberts from the UHS, unyielding. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Blake said. "I know our ships are old. I know the galaxy thinks we're using museum pieces. But we're all that stands between the Zephyrians and 20 million innocent people." The other captains were silent. Everyone knew the odds. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 6 star systems in 2 weeks. Their ships were faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything humans had built. The human patrol fleet was using technology that other species had abandoned centuries ago. "Admiral," said Captain Amy Rodriguez from the UHS Tenacity, "our weapons are kinetic railguns. Theirs are pure energy. Our engines are fusion-powered. Theirs use exotic matter. Our ships are 200 years old. Theirs were built last year." "I know all that, Amy," Blake replied. "But I also know something else. We're human, and humans have never been good at accepting defeat." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew had heard everything. Chief Engineer Ryan Davis was already pulling up technical manuals on his tablet. Communications Officer Sarah Johnson was checking their long-range sensors. These people had served with Jake for years. They trusted him, and he trusted them. "Admiral," Jake said, "the Defiance is ready to go." One by one, the other captains agreed. Some looked worried. Some looked determined. But all of them agreed. The human fleet would intercept the Zephyrians. 3 hours later, the 12 ships of humanity's patrol fleet left Earth orbit. They moved in a loose formation, their fusion engines leaving blue trails in space. To anyone watching, they looked like antiques heading to a scrapyard. News of their mission spread quickly through the galaxy. The Galactic News Network showed footage of the human ships alongside images of the sleek Zephyrian fleet. The comparison was embarrassing. Human vessels looked like metal boxes with engines attached. Zephyrian ships were beautiful crystal structures that seemed to float without effort. War Prince Zeltar received the news aboard his flagship, the Crystal Throne. He was the commander of the Zephyrian expansion fleet, a being of pure thought housed in a body of living crystal. When his intelligence officers told him about the approaching human force, he made a sound that might have been laughter. "Humans," he said to his council, "still using primitive kinetic weapons and fusion power. Their technology is older than some of my officers. Should we prepare for battle, War Prince?" asked his tactical advisor. "Prepare, yes, but not because we need to. Because this will be a perfect demonstration of Zephyrian superiority." Zeltar's crystal body glowed brighter as he became excited. "Send word to the Galactic Council. Tell them to watch what happens when primitive technology meets advanced civilization." The War Prince ordered his communications team to broadcast the coming battle across the galaxy. Every species would see what happened to those who opposed the Zephyrian Empire. The humans would be destroyed quickly and completely. But Zeltar had made an important mistake. He assumed that old technology meant weak technology. He thought that because human ships looked simple, they were simple. Most importantly, he believed that because humans fought differently from other galactic species, they fought badly. The two fleets moved toward each other through the darkness of space. The Zephyrian ships glided forward like deadly jewels. The human ships rumbled and shook as their old engines pushed them to maximum speed. On the bridge of the Defiance, Jake watched the enemy fleet grow larger on his screens. 12 human ships against 40 Zephyrian vessels, old fusion engines against exotic matter drives, simple railguns against energy weapons that could tear apart matter itself. "Captain," said Lisa Hayes, "we're being scanned. The Zephyrians are analyzing our ships." "Let them look," Jake replied. "I hope they like what they see." What the Zephyrians saw were ships built for durability rather than beauty. Weapons designed to throw chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Engines that could run for decades without major repairs. Most importantly, they saw crews who had spent their entire lives learning to make old technology work in new ways. The galaxy watched and waited. In a few hours, 12 human ships would meet the most advanced fleet in known space. Everyone expected the same result. The humans would fight bravely and die quickly. But Jake Morrison looked at his crew and felt something different. These people had fixed impossible problems with spare parts. They had kept ancient ships running through determination and skill. They had spent their lives proving that old didn't mean useless. The human fleet continued its course toward the Zephyrian armada. Soon, the galaxy would learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology. It was their refusal to quit. The human fleet had 6 hours before they would meet the Zephyrian armada. On most ships, this would be time for final preparations and prayer. On human ships, it was time to get creative. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Davis stood in the engine room of the UHS Vengeance, surrounded by tools and spare parts. His engineering team was doing something that would make other species call them crazy. They were rebuilding their weapons while flying through space at half the speed of light. "Chief, hand me that plasma conduit," Ryan called to Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos. Maria had 20 years of experience making broken things work. She was exactly the kind of person humans needed for this fight. "You sure about this, Commander?" Maria asked as she passed him the part. "We're basically turning our railgun into something completely different," Ryan grinned. "That's the point. The Zephyrians have been watching galactic military tactics for years. They know how everyone fights, but they don't know how humans adapt." Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out on every ship. Engineers were modifying weapons that were never meant to be modified. Tactical officers were writing new targeting programs based on old human military history. Science officers were analyzing enemy weaknesses that other species had never thought to look for. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison received reports from his department heads. Each report sounded impossible, but Jake had learned to trust his crew's creativity. "Captain," said Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez over the communication system, "we've successfully converted our main railgun into a multi-stage acceleration system. Instead of firing one projectile, we can now fire 12 smaller ones in sequence." "How much more damage will that do?" Jake asked. "Against normal shields, probably less. But against energy-based defenses that expect single impacts, it should be devastating." Jake nodded. Energy shields were designed to stop one big hit by spreading the force across the entire barrier. But if you hit the same spot 12 times in rapid succession, the shield couldn't spread that force quickly enough. Dr. Kevin Mitchell, the fleet's chief science officer, was aboard the UHS Tenacity, working on a different problem. He had been studying every piece of data they had about Zephyrian technology. What he found surprised him. "Captain Rodriguez," Kevin said to his ship's commander over the intercom, "I need you to see this." Captain Amy Rodriguez arrived in the science lab within minutes. Kevin had displays showing Zephyrian ship designs, weapon specifications, and tactical formations. "Look at this," Kevin said, pointing to the data. "Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly specialized. Every system is designed for maximum efficiency in predictable situations." Amy studied the information. "What does that mean for us?" "It means their ships are perfect for fighting other advanced species who follow standard galactic military doctrine. But humans have never followed standard anything." Kevin pulled up more data. See these energy weapons? They're designed to penetrate shields by calculating the exact frequency needed to disrupt the barrier. But our ships don't use energy shields. We use layered armor plating. Amy began to understand. So their weapons are optimized for a defense system we don't even have. Exactly. And look at their tactical formations. Perfect mathematical spacing for coordinated energy weapon fire. But that same formation is vulnerable to kinetic weapons that don't follow predictable flight paths. On the UHS Stubborn, Chief Petty Officer Sarah Johnson was having her own breakthrough. She had been analyzing the Zephyrian communication system, trying to understand how they coordinated their fleet movements. Captain Roberts, she called to her commanding officer. I think I found something important. Captain Nick Roberts came to her station. Sarah had been the fleet's best communications specialist for 8 years. If she found something, it was worth hearing. The Zephyrians use quantum entanglement for instant communication across their fleet, Sarah explained. It's incredibly advanced technology that lets them coordinate perfectly. That sounds like bad news for us, Roberts said. Actually, it might be good news. Quantum entanglement follows very specific rules, and one of those rules is that the system breaks down when exposed to certain types of interference. Sarah pulled up a technical diagram. If we can generate the right kind of chaotic interference pattern, we might be able to disrupt their communications. Can we do that with our equipment? Not normally, but I think I can modify our sensor arrays to broadcast interference instead of just receiving data. Across the fleet, human ingenuity was turning old equipment into new weapons. The UHS Relentless had modified its missile launchers to fire projectiles that could split into smaller warheads mid-flight. The UHS Indomitable had rigged its point defense guns to work together as a single massive weapon system. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian fleet continued its advance. War Prince Zeltar was confident and relaxed. His intelligence officers had completed their analysis of the human ships. War Prince, reported his tactical advisor. The humans are using kinetic railguns with chemical explosive missiles. Their engines are basic fusion reactors. Their shields are simple electromagnetic barriers. Pathetic, Zeltar replied. Our energy weapons will cut through their defenses like light through air. Our psionic coordination will let us target all 12 ships simultaneously. But the Zephyrians were making the same mistake that many species made when dealing with humans. They were analyzing human technology without understanding human thinking. Admiral Blake sent a message to all ships as they approached the battle zone. This is Admiral Blake to all vessels. In 30 minutes we engage the enemy. I want everyone to remember something. They think we're using obsolete weapons. They think we're following obsolete tactics. They think we're an obsolete species. Blake paused, then continued. They're about to learn that humans don't become obsolete. We just get more creative. On the Defiance, Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was ready. Ryan had finished his weapon modifications. Sarah had her communication jamming system online. Amy had rerouted power to give them maximum performance from their old engines. Captain, said Commander Lisa Hayes, enemy fleet is within sensor range. 40 ships all using crystal matrix hull construction. Energy weapon signatures are off the charts. Jake studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful and deadly. They moved in perfect formation like a dance of light and crystal. Their weapons could probably destroy any human ship with a single hit. But Jake was not worried. His ships might be old, but they were crewed by people who had spent their lives making the impossible work. Human engineers who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Human tacticians who studied every war their species had ever fought. Human crews who refused to accept that they couldn't win. All ships, this is Captain Morrison, Jake announced on the fleet communication channel. Remember what we learned in training. When you can't match the enemy's strength, you change the rules of the game. The distance between the fleets continued to shrink. Soon, the battle would begin. The Zephyrians expected a quick victory against primitive opponents. But they were about to discover that humans had turned being underestimated into an art form. The galaxy was watching. Everyone expected the same outcome. The advanced Zephyrian Empire would easily destroy the obsolete human fleet. Nobody expected humans to rewrite the rules of space combat in the next 6 hours. The battle began exactly as everyone expected. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire first, their energy weapons reaching across space to strike at the human ships. Beams of pure force that could melt asteroid belts struck the human vessels. But the first surprise came immediately. The energy beams, designed to penetrate advanced shields, hit the layered armor plating of human ships and scattered. The Zephyrian weapons were so advanced that they passed right through simple defenses without doing maximum damage. Direct hit on the resilience, reported Commander Lisa Hayes from her tactical station. Minimal damage to armor plating. Captain Jake Morrison smiled grimly. Their weapons are designed to fight energy shields, not metal plates. Lisa, begin evasive maneuvers. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The human fleet abandoned every rule of civilized space combat. Instead of maintaining formation and trading shots at long range, they charged directly at the enemy. The Zephyrian war prince Zeltar watched in confusion as the human ships began moving in what appeared to be random patterns. His tactical computers couldn't calculate their flight paths because there was no mathematical logic to their movements. What are they doing? Zeltar demanded. Unknown, war prince. Their movement patterns appear chaotic. Our targeting systems cannot predict their positions. But the human movements weren't random at all. Jake Morrison and the other captains were using tactics developed over thousands of years of human warfare. They were applying lessons learned in battles from ancient Earth to modern space combat. All ships, execute Pattern Omega, Admiral Blake ordered from the Resilience. Pattern Omega was a formation that looked like chaos to anyone watching. Ships would spread out, come together, separate again, and cross each other's paths in ways that seemed to make no sense. But every human captain knew the pattern by heart. Captain Steve Parker on the UHS Relentless received targeting data from 3 other ships simultaneously. The chaotic movement pattern was actually creating overlapping fields of fire that gave human gunners multiple angles of attack on every enemy vessel. The Zephyrian ships, designed for precise mathematical warfare, couldn't adapt to the human tactics. Their coordination system depended on predictable movements and logical formations. The human pattern created too many variables for their computers to process. Fire, Jake ordered. The human fleet's modified weapons unleashed their fury. But instead of the simple railgun projectiles the Zephyrians expected, they faced something completely different. The UHS Vengeance fired its modified multi-stage railgun. 12 projectiles struck the same Zephyrian cruiser in rapid sequence. The first 3 shots overloaded the ship's energy shield. The next 6 punched through the crystal hull. The final 3 detonated inside the ship, tearing it apart from within. Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos on the UHS Stubborn had an even more creative solution. When her ship's main weapon was damaged by enemy fire, she didn't report it as destroyed. Instead, she rerouted power from the ship's engines through the hull itself. Captain Roberts, I've turned our entire ship into a railgun, Maria reported calmly. What does that mean? Roberts asked. It means we can accelerate projectiles using our hull as the barrel. We just became a giant shotgun. The Stubborn began firing pieces of debris, spare parts, and even furniture at velocities that turned garbage into deadly weapons. The Zephyrians had no defense against attacks from random objects traveling at significant fractions of light speed. Dr. Kevin Mitchell's analysis proved correct in the most dramatic way possible. The Zephyrian energy weapons designed to counter advanced technology were almost useless against human ships that used simple, crude defenses. But the humans had their own surprise waiting. As the battle continued, Chief Communications Officer Sarah Johnson activated her modified sensor array. All ships, beginning communication jamming, she announced. The jamming wasn't random noise. Sarah had studied human psychological warfare techniques and applied them to alien technology. The interference patterns she broadcast were based on chaotic human thought processes that followed no logical rules. The effect on the Zephyrian fleet was immediate and devastating. Their quantum communication system, designed for perfect coordination, began experiencing what could only be described as confusion. The mathematical precision of their collective consciousness was disrupted by patterns of pure human chaos. War Prince Zeltar felt the disruption as physical pain. The perfect coordination of his fleet began to break down. Ships that had moved like parts of a single organism now struggled to communicate basic information. What is that interference? He demanded. Unknown, War Prince. The patterns don't match any known communication system. They appear to be random thoughts, but they weren't random. They were human. And human thinking had evolved over millions of years to solve problems through creativity, adaptation, and controlled chaos. The Zephyrian mind, evolved for logical perfection, couldn't process the interference patterns. Captain Jake Morrison saw the enemy fleet's coordination beginning to fail and pressed the advantage. All ships implement Doctrine Mayhem. Doctrine Mayhem was something only humans would consider a military strategy. It involved deliberately doing things that made no tactical sense, purely because the enemy wouldn't expect them. The UHS Indomitable, commanded by Captain Jake Anderson, demonstrated the doctrine by attempting something that violated every rule of space combat. When his ship was severely damaged, Anderson didn't retreat or surrender. Instead, he used his failing engines to ram directly into a Zephyrian dreadnought. The impact destroyed both ships, but it also created a debris field that Anderson's final act had calculated perfectly. The wreckage formed a barrier that disrupted the Zephyrian formation and gave the other human ships cover for their attacks. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez on the Defiant saw Anderson's sacrifice and was inspired to attempt something even more impossible. She began manually overriding her ship's fusion reactor safety systems. "Captain Morrison," she called over the intercom, "I can turn our reactor into a directed nuclear explosion." "That will destroy us too," Jake pointed out. "Not if we eject the reactor core and detonate it remotely. We'll lose main power, but we can run on backup systems long enough to ram it into enemy ships." Jake made the decision in seconds. "Do it!" The Defiance ejected its fusion reactor and pushed it toward 3 Zephyrian cruisers using maneuvering thrusters. When Amy detonated it remotely, the explosion vaporized all 3 enemy ships and created an electromagnetic pulse that disabled 2 more. The galaxy watched, in shock as the methodical Zephyrian fleet began falling apart under assault from weapons that shouldn't work and tactics that shouldn't succeed. The humans were fighting like they had never heard of military science, using their ships as expendable tools rather than precious resources. War Prince Zeltar realized that his perfect fleet was losing to opponents he had dismissed as primitive. The humans weren't fighting by any rules he understood. They were willing to sacrifice individual ships to destroy multiple enemies. They turned their own equipment into weapons. They used chaos as a tactical advantage. "Send distress signal to the home fleet," Zeltar ordered. "Request immediate reinforcements." For the first time in Zephyrian history, their military was calling for help. And they were calling for help against humans. The message was intercepted by galactic intelligence services across the galaxy. News networks that had been preparing to report on the quick destruction of the human fleet now scrambled to understand what they were witnessing. The battle was far from over, but already the impossible was happening. 12 obsolete human ships were not just surviving against 40 advanced Zephyrian vessels. They were winning, and they were doing it by refusing to fight like anyone expected them to fight. The Zephyrian War Prince Zeltar was beginning to understand that he faced an enemy unlike any his species had encountered. As more of his ships fell to human attacks, he decided to use his greatest advantage, the psionic network that connected all Zephyrian minds. "All ships, full psionic coordination," Zeltar commanded. "We will attack as one mind controlling 40 vessels." The Zephyrian fleet began to move with renewed purpose. Every ship knew instantly what every other ship was doing. Their collective consciousness allowed perfect tactical coordination that no individual captain could match. But Lieutenant Sarah Johnson had been monitoring the psionic frequencies from her station aboard the UHS Defiance. What she discovered changed the entire battle. "Captain Morrison," she called excitedly, "I've figured out how their mind link works. It's based on quantum entanglement between their brain crystals, but there's something interesting about the frequency patterns." Jake hurried to her station. "What did you find?" "Their thoughts follow mathematical formulas. Every idea, every decision, every tactical choice follows logical patterns. It's like their entire species thinks in organized equations." Jake began to understand. "And human thoughts?" "Are complete chaos compared to theirs." "Captain, I think I can disrupt their entire network by broadcasting human thought patterns through our communication arrays." "Do it." Sarah began recording her own thoughts as she solved engineering problems, remembered childhood experiences, and planned what to have for dinner later. She took these random, chaotic human mental patterns and broadcast them directly into the Zephyrian psionic network. The effect was immediate and devastating. War Prince Zeltar felt like his mind was being attacked by pure confusion. The logical, mathematical patterns of Zephyrian thought were disrupted by exposure to human mental chaos. "What is happening?" Zeltar screamed as his perfect coordination began to break down. Across his fleet, Zephyrian commanders began experiencing what could only be called a collective headache. Their shared consciousness, evolved for logical thinking, couldn't process the creative randomness of human thought patterns. Captain Nick Roberts on the UHS Unyielding saw the enemy fleet's confusion and decided to make things worse. He ordered his crew to begin implementing what humans called doctrine mayhem, tactical decisions that made no logical sense, but were devastating in practice. All weapons. Target the enemy flagship, Roberts ordered. Then 5 seconds later, he changed his mind completely. Cancel that. Target the ship furthest from us instead. The Zephyrian fleet's tactical computers tried to predict human behavior and failed completely. Every time they calculated what the humans would do next, the humans did something different. Not because they had a better plan, but because changing plans randomly made them unpredictable. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez had finished her most ambitious project aboard the Defiance. She had successfully converted their damaged fusion reactor into a weapon that violated several laws of physics and most principles of common sense. Captain Morrison, she reported, I've managed to turn our reactor core into a directed nuclear explosion device. We can fire it at enemy ships like a really big missile. How big? Jake asked. Big enough to vaporize anything within 50 kilometers of the detonation point. Jake looked at the tactical display. 3 Zephyrian cruisers were moving in perfect formation, exactly 50 kilometers apart. Fire when ready. The fusion core missile struck the center ship and detonated with the force of a small star. All 3 Zephyrian vessels vanished in a ball of nuclear fire that lit up the entire battle zone. Captain Steve Parker on the UHS Relentless saw Amy's success and decided to try something even more dangerous. His ship had been severely damaged, but instead of retreating, he ordered his crew to prepare for ramming speed. Sir, ramming an enemy ship will destroy us too, his tactical officer pointed out. I know, Parker replied calmly, but it will also destroy them, and we're outnumbered 4-1. Trade math says we should make that trade. Parker aimed his ship at the largest Zephyrian vessel he could find and pushed his damaged engines to maximum power. The UHS Relentless became a guided missile weighing several thousand tons and traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The impact destroyed both ships instantly, but the explosion created a debris field that damaged 3 more Zephyrian vessels and disrupted their formation completely. War Prince. Zeltar watched his fleet falling apart under attacks from opponents who seemed to have no regard for their own survival. The humans were fighting like each battle was their last, willing to sacrifice everything to achieve victory. How many ships have we lost? He demanded. 15 destroyed, War Prince. 8 more severely damaged. The humans have lost 6 vessels, but they're inflicting far more damage than they're taking. Zeltar couldn't understand it. His ships were more advanced. His weapons were more powerful. His fleet outnumbered the humans more than 3-1, but the humans kept winning through tactics that made no sense. Dr. Kevin Mitchell aboard the UHS Tenacity had been analyzing the battle patterns and reached an important conclusion. He sent a message to Admiral Blake on the Resilience. Admiral, I think I understand why we're winning. The Zephyrians have optimized their technology for fighting other advanced species, but we're not advanced. We're adaptive. Every time they solve one of our problems, we create 2 new ones. Blake studied the tactical display and saw that Kevin was right. The human fleet had started with 12 ships using simple weapons and basic tactics. But as the battle progressed, they had become something completely different. The UHS Stubborn was now firing random debris at velocities that turned garbage into kinetic weapons. The UHS Vengeance had modified its railguns to fire in patterns that created temporary space-time distortions. The UHS Indomitable was using its damaged hull as an antenna to broadcast jamming signals that disrupted enemy sensors. All ships, Blake announced, prepare for final assault. We're going to show them what happens when humans stop playing by the rules. What happened next became known in military history as the Morrison Maneuver, named after Captain Jake Morrison, who first suggested it. The remaining human ships would coordinate their attacks to create a feedback loop in the Zephyrian psionic network. Sarah, Jake called to his communications officer, I need you to broadcast our tactical planning session directly into their mind link. Sir, that will tell them exactly what we're going to do. That's the point. We're going to give them so much information that their logical minds can't process it all. Sarah began broadcasting the chaotic planning session where 6 human captains argued, changed their minds, suggested impossible ideas, and eventually agreed on a plan that made no tactical sense but felt right to them. The effect on the Zephyrian collective consciousness was like forcing a computer to divide by zero. Their logical minds tried to process the human decision-making process and failed completely. The psionic network that had been their greatest strength became a weakness as confusion spread through their entire fleet. War Prince. Zeltar felt his perfect coordination collapsing, as his commanders began making individual decisions based on panic rather than logic. For the first time in Zephyrian history, their fleet was operating without collective consciousness. "Send emergency signal to home fleet," Zeltar ordered. "We need immediate reinforcements. The humans are using weapons we don't understand, and tactics that violate the laws of military science." The message was intercepted by intelligence services across the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, an advanced species was calling for help against humans. The news networks that had been preparing obituaries for the human fleet now struggled to explain what they were. Witnessing Admiral Blake received reports that the Zephyrian fleet was breaking formation and beginning to retreat, but he wasn't finished with them yet. "All ships pursue the enemy. We're going to make sure they remember this lesson." The human fleet, reduced to 6 operational vessels, began chasing 40 Zephyrian ships across the star system. It should have been impossible. But the humans had already done so many impossible things that one more didn't seem difficult. The galaxy watched in amazement as the remnants of humanity's obsolete patrol fleet pursued the most advanced military force in recent history, and somehow incredibly the humans were still winning. The final phase of the battle began when War Prince Zeltar realized that retreat was impossible. The human ships, despite being older and fewer in number, were somehow faster than his fleeing vessels. Their crews had modified their engines beyond all safety limits, turning their ships into barely controlled rockets. "War Prince," reported his tactical officer. "The humans are gaining on us." "How is that possible?" Zeltar studied the sensor data and felt something that Zephyrians rarely experienced: genuine fear. The human ships were running their fusion reactors at 150% of recommended capacity. Any rational species would consider this suicidal, but humans appeared to consider it normal. Admiral Tony Blake aboard the UHS Resilience made the decision that would end the Zephyrian Empire's expansion forever. His ship had suffered critical damage, with hull breaches on 3 decks and his fusion reactor showing dangerous instability readings. "All crew, this is Admiral Blake," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We have one chance to end this war completely. I'm going to ram the enemy flagship." Captain Jake Morrison heard Blake's announcement and felt his heart sink. The Admiral was planning to sacrifice himself and his crew to destroy the enemy command ship. But Jake had a different idea. "Admiral, this is Morrison. Don't ram them. Let me try something else first." Jake turned to his science officer, Dr. Kevin Mitchell. "Kevin, you said their psionic network was vulnerable to chaotic interference. What would happen if we broadcast pure human creativity directly into their collective consciousness?" Kevin's eyes widened as he understood what Jake was suggesting. "Captain, that could destroy their ability to think logically, and might cause permanent damage to their mental processes." "Good," Jake replied grimly. "Sarah, I need you to record something for me." Lieutenant Sarah Johnson prepared her communication systems to record Jake's message. But instead of recording tactical information or surrender demands, Jake began talking about something completely different. "I'm thinking about my daughter's birthday party last year," Jake began. "She wanted a cake shaped like a spaceship, but we couldn't find a pan that shape. So my wife and I decided to make one by cutting up 3 regular cakes and sticking them together with frosting." Jake continued talking about random memories, personal experiences, and creative solutions to everyday problems. He talked about fixing broken appliances with spare parts, about changing plans at the last minute because something better occurred to him, about the joy of solving problems in ways that shouldn't work but somehow did. Sarah broadcast Jake's rambling monologue directly into the Zephyrian psionic network. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the enemy fleet. War Prince Zeltar felt his mind being invaded by concepts that his species had never developed. Human creativity, adaptability, and the ability to find joy in chaos were completely alien to the logical Zephyrian consciousness. "Stop the transmission," Zeltar screamed, but it was too late. Across his fleet, Zephyrian commanders began experiencing something they had no words for: the desire to try things that made no logical sense, simply because they might be interesting. Their perfectly ordered minds started generating random thoughts and creative ideas that served no tactical purpose. The collective consciousness that had been their species' greatest strength began falling apart as individual Zephyrians started thinking for themselves instead of sharing a group mind. Captain Nick Roberts on the UHS, unyielding, saw the enemy fleet's complete breakdown and moved in for the final attack. But instead of using conventional weapons, he decided to demonstrate the ultimate human tactical innovation, turning a defeat into a victory. "All weapons, fire everything we have left at the space between enemy ships," Roberts ordered. "Sir, there's nothing there," his tactical officer replied. "Exactly. Create a debris field from our own weapons. Turn our ammunition into obstacles." The human fleet fired every remaining missile, railgun slug, and projectile they had into empty space between the Zephyrian ships. The explosions created a massive cloud of debris and electromagnetic interference that blocked sensors and disrupted communication. Then Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos demonstrated why humans were the galaxy's best improvisers. She had been working on a project in the Stubborn's engine room that defied every safety regulation ever written. "Captain Roberts," she announced, "I've figured out how to turn our damaged fusion reactor into a gravity weapon." "What does that mean?" "I can create a localized gravitational field that will pull all the debris we just created into a concentrated mass. Then I can launch that mass at the enemy flagship." Roberts didn't hesitate. "Do it." Maria activated her jury-rigged gravity projector and watched as thousands of pieces of debris began forming into a single massive projectile. When she launched it at the Crystal Throne, War Prince Zeltar's flagship, the impact was devastating. The debris mass struck the Zephyrian command ship with the force of a small asteroid. The Crystal Throne, built for beauty and efficiency rather than durability, shattered like glass. War Prince Zeltar had just enough time to send one final message before his ship was destroyed. "To all Zephyrian forces, avoid human space. They are not primitive, they are something else entirely." With their command ship destroyed and their collective consciousness disrupted by exposure to human creativity, the remaining Zephyrian fleet scattered in all directions. Some ships attempted to return to their home system. Others simply fled into deep space. Admiral Blake, who had been prepared to sacrifice his ship, found himself commanding a complete victory. The most advanced fleet in galactic history had been defeated by 12 obsolete human vessels using weapons and tactics that shouldn't have worked. The news of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than the fleeing Zephyrian ships. Within hours, the Galactic Council received surrender offers from 17 different species who had been planning their own rebellions against the Federation. The message was clear: if humans could destroy the Zephyrian Empire with obsolete ships, no one wanted to face them with modern ones. Captain Jake Morrison found himself promoted to admiral and given command of the rebuilt human fleet. When the Galactic Council asked him to explain how 12 old ships had defeated an empire, his response became legendary. "You made the same mistake everyone makes when they look at human technology," Jake told the assembled representatives of dozens of species. "You saw our ships and weapons and decided they were primitive. But you forgot something important." Jake paused, looking around the great chamber of the Galactic Council. "Humans don't just use technology. We become it. We adapt it, modify it, and make it do things it was never designed to do. We've been doing that for 10,000 years, and we're very good at it." The council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. Every species in the galaxy had been measuring human capabilities by human equipment. None of them had considered measuring human capabilities by human creativity. "The Zephyrians had better ships, better weapons, and better technology," Jake continued. "But we had something they couldn't counter. We had the ability to change the rules of the game while we were playing it." Commander Lisa Hayes, now Captain Hayes, received a new assignment commanding the UHS Defiance II, a ship that looked exactly like the old Defiance but incorporated every lesson learned from the battle. The new human fleet appeared to be the same collection of simple, outdated vessels, but they were now feared throughout the galaxy. Dr. Kevin Mitchell published a research paper that became required reading in every military academy. His conclusion was simple but revolutionary. Advanced technology creates advanced capabilities, but it also creates advanced limitations. Primitive technology in the hands of adaptive users has no limitations except imagination. The Zephyrian Empire never recovered from their defeat. Their perfect collective consciousness had been permanently damaged by exposure to chaotic human thought patterns. Individual Zephyrians began developing creativity and independent thinking, which their society considered a mental illness. Within a year, the Zephyrian Empire had collapsed into dozens of independent colonies, each trying to find their own path forward without the guidance of collective consciousness. The human patrol fleet, once considered a curious relic of a primitive species, became the Federation's most effective military force. Other species began studying human tactics, but they could never truly copy them. The tactics required a mindset that valued adaptation over optimization, creativity over efficiency, and the willingness to try impossible things just to see if they might work. Jake Morrison's final report to Federation Command contained a warning that would shape galactic politics for centuries to come. Never mistake human obsolescence for human weakness. We don't upgrade our technology and abandon the old. We upgrade our creativity and make the old do new things. That's not a limitation. It's our greatest strength. The galaxy had learned that humanity's most dangerous weapon wasn't their technology. It was their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. And now everyone knew that when humans said their equipment was obsolete, it just meant they were about to surprise you with what obsolete equipment could do in creative hands. The war was over, but the human legend had just begun,